Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Career Diaries by Elemed, the podcast dedicated to talking about careers in the MedTech industry. I'm super excited to have with me the one and only, the lady that doesn't even need an introduction, actually, Suzie Halliday. Yay! Suzie
Yeah.
Halliday is Vice President of Regulatory at BSI and has been in the industry a very long time and is someone who has a huge amount of experience within medical devices, but not only at a notified body, which is what everybody knows you for, Suzie, but actually having worked university side and in hospitals in the past. So I'm super excited to learn and explore a little bit more about your story here today. So thank you for being on the show.
You for having me and for the really nice introduction. Yeah, I'm a little bit intimidated just because of some of the other guests that you've had on, but okay.
No, not at all, Suzie. I think you deserve to be here in your own right. So, for those people who perhaps don't know who you are, although I'm sure that's really only a handful, maybe you could give a brief introduction as to who you are and what you do.
Okay, so as you said, I'm currently responsible for the regulatory team in BSI, and that includes all of the medical devices notified body, the IVD notified body, the UK approved body, lots of international regulatory schemes that BSI does, and our newest AI notified body. So the team is now 18, which is really big for me. And I guess they're really, really competent people. They come from 12 different countries, and I think they speak 12 different languages. So they're the heads of the respective notified bodies and approved bodies and international schemes. So they're all really brilliant people.
And you're overseeing that, so a lot of bodies basically, in
Yeah.
terms of what you're heading. But Suzie, you spoke about sort of like the international aspects of it, and I can't help but notice, obviously you're in the UK, but you do have an accent, so you're also somebody who's international, I would say.
Yeah. So the accent is Canadian, but yeah, parents are not Canadian, and partner is not Canadian. So yeah, he's British. So we live in the UK. Um, I guess before I had this role in BSI, I started BSI as a scheme manager and technical specialist. I then get to lead the whole orthopedic and dental team for BSI at the time that 2005 50 came out in the EU. So it reclassified all the hips, knees, and shoulders. So the orthopedic team went from 2 to 25 in a year and a bit. So I got really good at hiring people and training them. So then, when other teams in BSI needed to get big, I was offered a role to be the head of training and operations, which I get again. So in startups, you can have these big titles. Training and operations is now spread out across many, many people in BSI. But at the time, I was head of training and operations. And so then BSI started to get really big. Then, so the head of the notified body retired, and I applied for his job and got it in 2015. And you know what happened then? So the Brexit referendum was 2016. So BSI had to open offices in the Netherlands, and I got to lead some of that project. The legislation for Europe changed in 2017, so we started to not only need to deal with Brexit, but we needed to deal with MDR and IVDR. So, yeah, well, it's been a whirlwind within BSI. Lots of opportunity for growth, lots of incredible change. So it's never been boring. Yeah, that's the BSI bit. Do you want me to go back before BSI?
Yeah, so how did you end up in the UK? That's what I'm interested about.
Oh, in the UK. So I am born in Canada, and but again, family moved every 3 years. So I have lived in Rhode Island and Nebraska and Virginia and West Germany when the wall was up and it
Wow.
was called West Germany. I get my first driving license in West Germany. I still have it. Um, yeah, so my family moves a lot. then I go back to Canada to do my first two degrees in Waterloo, which is north and west of Toronto. I took a job in the United States in Dallas, Texas, because it was this incredible pediatric orthopedic hospital that was privately funded and had an incredible research department. And um, I designed spinal bits. I did some work with other congenital absences on in pediatric orthopedics. Um, yeah, so yeah, that was the start. That was one big orthopedic hospital in Dallas. It also was linked to a level one trauma in the United States, the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center. So there was also some orthopedic trauma cases that we got to see. After that, I fell in love with British Man. Um,
Ah.
yeah, and but also had the opportunity to do my doctorate. So I moved and started my doctorate in Oxford. Um, and so that lasts for about 3 years. It was, again, Oxford is a lovely place to get to live and work, and it's a fascinating place because I mean, if you think that you are a well-rounded person and you think that you've got good grades, and Oxford is a real leveling, everyone's got good grades. Everyone plays an instrument. Everyone speaks multiple languages. It was a real, okay, yeah, you're just average, so you fit in a little bit here. Um, after Oxford, after I did finish my doctorate, I did some fun things. I intentionally chose a role in Japan at the National Institute for Advanced Industrial Sciences, which was mathematical modeling of human bodies. They're in cities that are northeast of Tokyo. So I got to live there for a little while. I then I took another fun job in Melbourne, Australia at the Royal Orthopedic Hospital doing clinical trials, again, back in orthopedics. Um, Melbourne is a beautiful place to get to live and work. It was like having multiple summers in a row because I worked it so that I didn't have to deal with any Northern Hemisphere winters at all anywhere. Um, yeah, and then I guess then the BSI job came up, and so I needed to understand some of the regulatory things to get better at some of the research things and some of the clinical trial things. So I took the BSI job, I thought for a few years, just so that I could learn the regulatory stuff I wanted to learn. And then, but yeah, it's just I keep learning at BSI, so I keep staying.
Yeah. So, and how long have you been at BSI now?
18 years.
Wow. Wow, that's a
Yeah.
good retention rate, I have to say. So you said that you intentionally chose to go to Japan. What was it about Japan that sort of made you say, "Hey, I need to make sure I go and spend some time there"?
Um, it is probably the place with the most different culture that I have ever lived. Um, Canada and the UK are quite similar. Canada has a similar education system and a similar legal system and a similar system of government, House of Commons and House of Lords, so it's very much like the UK.
Mm.
The US, again, people speak English. The North Americans, it wasn't that difficult to live and work there. Japan was incredibly different. I looked it different. Uh, but I made the most of getting to. I didn't buy a car. I hired a bicycle. I was incredibly fit. I learned to take the trains. It was the very early days of smartphones, so you could flash a smartphone over the kanji or the hiragana or the katakana characters, and it might tell me what was on the menu. Um,
Wow.
otherwise, you have to eat incredibly healthily because you recognize bananas and apples and yeah, okay, I recognize that. I'll eat that. Um,
Wow.
yeah, Japan was an incredible opportunity. Loved it.
And so were you on your own when you were in Japan?
I was, but so my partner's name is Jeff, and he came and stayed with me for a while. But yeah, I went and worked for 4 to 5 months. Yeah.
Well, it's a brave thing also to do, right? Where culturally it's also so different and so unknown, and also to be there sort of like on your own doing it. What were some of the key things that you learned during that time about
Well,
yourself?
so first of all, Japan is incredibly safe. You're right. So I guess there would be places I don't know that I'd go and live and work by myself, but not Japan is totally safe, very clean. Um, yeah. So what did I learn about myself? Um, definitely tried to speak the language because it's always nice to try and say, please and thank you and hello and goodbye, at least in wherever you are. I also took the opportunity to, take public transit and see, oh, I saw Hiroshima. I intentionally went to see it. I went to see some of the most important Shinto shrines that Japanese people think are important. I intentionally went to see Mount Fuji and go for a really long walk, as high as I could in a day. Yeah, I didn't get right to the top because it's covered in snow lots of the year, but it was, yeah, beautiful. Yeah, take the opportunity to travel, I guess is what I learned about myself. I
Yeah.
should, yeah, enjoy what I've got when I've got it.
Yeah, and it's so eye-opening as well, I find, like just being in a different country, a different culture, one that you're not so familiar with. Um, how has, in terms of your career then, so all of, the working abroad, the international exposure, the meeting people from different cultures, how has that shaped who you are today, Suzie Halliday, as a professional?
Um, Well, I think it's something that people are talking about a lot at the moment. Diversity, inclusivity. I think I got that really early in my life. I think it's been expanded more recently because I used to think, okay, I am inclusive. I am hiring a diverse group. As I said, my existing group is diverse. BSI as a whole is really diverse. I think we've got employees from more than 25 countries. There's 1,000 BSI people that work in medical devices now. But so how has it shaped me? I am good at explaining things. I try to be clear. I think that's important to make people feel comfortable when English is not their first language. I'd like to say that persistence is important as well. When you have to deal with lots and lots of different cultures and different people, and I'm fairly persistent. Um, I'm very curious. That maybe that's the auditor in me, and technical specialist and scientist as well. But I am incredibly curious. I ask a lot of questions. I'm not afraid if I'm the dumbest person in the room. I guess I've learned that by working in different places with lots of different people.
And these are all, and curiosity is something that like is becoming more and more, like people talk more and more about the value of actually asking questions, asking good questions, and also being curious and questioning the status quo. So it's interesting that you identify that in yourself, because I find that, like, me as a person, I try to be, it's like an effort, but it's not inherent. And actually having that inherent in you, I think, helps open your eyes to different possibilities, and
Mm.
different ways of problem solving. Coming back to the career then, right? So you've been at BSI for a long time, but you said that you initially joined because you needed to better understand the regulations to help you with the science. And obviously you've been there 18 years later. So what was it that made you say, actually, this notified body route, like this is a real career move for me now, as opposed to just sort of like a stopgap?
Okay, so I guess when you've been talking to other people and they've got SME experience and then big corporate experience, BSI was an SME when I start. And so then you get these incredible titles with incredible opportunities in it. So we were allowed to be scheme managers and technical specialists. We were allowed to QMS audit. We were allowed to be tutors. So SME people get lots and lots of, as you get bigger and bigger, people have to, okay, here's the team that you're in and you're doing this and or you're doing this or you're doing this. And so the SME, when we were small, BSI hired a lot of like-minded people, and lots of them have stayed. I don't like, I am not the most long-serving BSI employee. There's others that, yeah, have been there longer than me. And I think so. Okay, so why have I stayed? The challenge of the work, as I said, the 2005 50 reclassification, Brexit, MDR and IVDR for the EU. UK approved body is just about to start to, change again. But there's been other little fun things as well. Like we used to do CAMDCAS audits for the government of Canada, but now we do MD-SAP audits for the government of Canada. So that was fun to learn and change. I guess, yeah, is that the curiosity? I keep staying because there's more stuff to learn.
Yeah, yeah. And it goes to show that, you don't actually have to like move company to keep growing, but actually being able to continually learn and move different roles within the same company is also a way of getting career evolution. And I find that, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but sometimes I'm asked the question, sometimes people might join a company and they're there for, I don't know, a year and a half. And then it's sort of like they might approach me with the question of, Eleanor, look, I've joined this company. The role isn't what I thought it was going to be. I'm not learning, right? I'm just sort of like repeating the same experience over and over again, but I'm afraid of how that's going to look on my CV. Should I leave, or should I just wait to get to, maybe 4 years, just keep doing it for a few more years so that it looks good on my CV before then I make the move? I'd be interested, actually, before I'll tell you what I think. I'm interested, because you're also a hiring manager. What do you think to that conundrum?
Oh, I am not a professional recruiter like you. What I I think there are times that people can explain, career movement. I think there's also times that everyone can explain career gaps. Lots stuff happens.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't think it's necessarily bad. I think you could explain it. And isn't it positive to say, I made a mistake. I'm really more ambitious than that. I really am wanting a big challenge. Would you still, okay, your turn. Would you say, well, that's negative?
No, but I say the exact same thing. So I always talk about value, right? So for me, it's always about, what value have you added to that company in the time that you've been there? And if you join a startup company, for example, where things are so fast moving and changing, as you said, you wear lots of different hats and you've got your fingers in lots of pies. Well, perhaps there'd be an argument to say in a shorter period of time you could accomplish something rather quite big, that somebody that's working in perhaps a very narrow role in a really big company, it might take them longer to have the same depth of impact. So I think it's all about value that you're adding to the company in the time that you're there, but also value that you're getting yourself as a professional, because there's no point just repeating the same experience over and over again, because then you're not growing and you're not developing. So I always encourage, make conscious decisions when you are making career moves, and really evaluate your options when you're there, and do your due diligence on the company and all that sort of stuff, to minimize your finding yourself in that situation. But everyone that I have spoken to that is a hiring manager, when I ask them this question, they pretty much say the same thing as you, Suzie. They say, actually it says a lot for someone to be able to say, hey, I made a mistake, and actually it can be explained. The thing that companies tend to look for, in particular HR and professional recruiters, is patterns of behavior, right? So if you see that it's a pattern over a number of jobs over a very long period of time, and then there's this feeling of job hopping. But for one particular instance where something hasn't quite worked out, well, that's just called life. And actually, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Coming back to you then, Suzie. You come across as someone very serene, I have to say. You're a very good communicator. You're quite softly spoken, but at the same time, you kind of give me the impression of a swan. You know that analogy?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Graceful, and then put it furiously underneath. Um,
Yeah. I,
uh,
I, um, well, you're okay, so you're right. I like to work hard though. Um, I like to make the most of things, and I don't think it's a burden sometimes to have to read and figure things out and um yeah, but I have lots of help at BSI. And I have, when you get lots of really good people together, there are things that we share with each other. We don't always start from scratch. So um yeah, but I mean, there have been some incredible challenges. Like, do you remember when the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists published all the things about how bad the notified bodies were and how horrible the gynecological meshes and breast implants and metal on metal hips? I mean, we, that was an incredible, I think BSI found every article published in every language that mentioned a device that was on a BSI certificate. And we addressed every single query. Are we sure that our audits were up to date? Are we sure we made good calls when those devices were put on those certificates? But that, that's exciting for some of the wrong reasons, but you can, I don't think there's any device that has no risk.
yeah,
I think we did a lot of educating of journalists. But it was fun and exciting. And then, okay, so then look again at the COVID pandemic. Um, when BSI was always home based, so we didn't have to deal with some of the things. Some roles needed to learn how to work from home. But when the UK didn't have enough ventilators or enough PPE, then people, again, the attitude was, all right, well, if the automotive manufacturers can make parts and the ventilator manufacturers can make more faster if they've got more raw materials, then we can help by auditing the automotive manufacturers enough to say, okay, you know, you have a raw material that a medical device manufacturer could use. It isn't so I like challenges, and maybe my feet are pedaling a bit below the water, as you said, but it isn't me by myself. There's lots and lots of people that work that hard and want to do the right thing.
yeah. So it's all about sort of like driving towards the same purpose. What I'm
Yeah.
interested in though as well is obviously like you're in a big role. It's a very visible role, Suzie, the role that you're in. You're overseeing a lot of different things. You're dealing with some of these big high pressure situations, and you obviously have the team that you lean on and that you all support each other. But what other tools and techniques do you have in place personally to help you manage the stress and the anxiety and just, all of the pressure that you must be dealing with in your role?
Yeah, so I swim.
Oh,
Um, yeah, I I open water swim. So
oh,
I live on the south coast of England, and so the harbor is just here and just outside this window. But just around the corner from that is the Atlantic Ocean. So yeah, I swim. I think I have been swimming at least once a month for about 7 years now, without missing a month. And in the summertime, yeah, it becomes, 3 or 4 times a week. But there are some really horrible months like January in the UK and December in the UK is so yeah, but I force myself to go at least once a
wow.
month.
Even in the
Yeah,
winter, you go
yeah,
in the UK.
yeah.
And how long do you swim for?
In the winter time, it's probably 10, 15 minutes.
Okay,
This morning was 45.
nice.
Yeah, I can swim more than a kilometer. Um,
Wow. Wow. I
yeah.
didn't know that about you, Suzie. What else?
I
What else have
so
you
that I guess that helps
yeah.
because cold water definitely makes you yeah, it clears your head out
Yeah.
and you can come back and do new topics. Other things though, Jeff is a really good sailor. Jeff and I ski. So I think again, if we choose active holidays so that again, you have to focus and not kill yourself sailing or skiing. So it makes me forget about work for a little while and
Yeah.
then come back a bit refreshed and start again.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on work-life balance, work-life flow?
I, I think it's incredibly important. I think again to yeah, to benefit from the time off, you do sometimes have to work hard. And there are some long days and there are some early starts and some late evenings, but um I think you have to be fair to your employer, but I also think you have to be fair to yourself. I hope that I line manage that way. I hope I lead that way. Um, my own line managers have been incredible. Um, and the pandemic has taught a lot of people that, we can trust people to get stuff done if you don't see them all the time. Um, yeah,
And that is one of the good things about the role that BSI were having in particular some of the roles, because you already had like a pretty decent setup for remote working from before. And actually what we saw was actually with quite a few of our notified body clients, that there wasn't a huge change on the tech file review side. It was more on the audit side that there was actually a big change when it came to how do we make that
but
work.
isn't that fascinating though? And I mean, okay, so again, I can talk about the BSI experience, but we are trying to work in a hybrid way, which
Yeah.
is incredibly good for work-life balance of people that used to be, platinum members on 5 airlines all at the same time, like but so it's good for their work-life balance. I think it's good for the environment.
Yeah.
Um, and it's good for the manufacturers because the manufacturers don't have to fly everybody in. If parts of it can be done remotely, I mean, yeah, let parts that can be done remotely get done remotely. There's lots of document reviewing. There's lots of IT system reviewing. So if you can share screens and see it, you can do a really good regulatory audit in a hybrid way. Then if there are controlled environments and noisy manufacturing areas, and you have to see the machines and things get inspected as they come in or as they, get released, then parts of the audit are done on site. But I think that's good. I think that's good for notified bodies to retain staff. I think it's good, as I said, for the environment.
Yeah, and I think it's also, improving efficiency and productivity as well, and in a world where there is a backlog and there aren't enough notified bodies and capacity is an issue, we have to use the tools that are available to us, to make sure that we're, producing obviously the right outcome, but also that we're not ignoring how technology can actually help. And actually, I have a question for you. So
Sure.
if you fast forward into the future, I don't know how fast forward you'd need to go for this, but I'm talking about AI, right? And there's like chat GPT and big data. How do you see AI impacting the role of a notified body?
Oh, well, so our AI notified body, there's a group of incredible people that are starting. So the first thing that's really interesting to me is that they are licensing software to algorithmically audit the products, because technical specialists in orthopedics, we used to read a lot of test reports, but they're not going to read 80,000 lines of code. So they're learning to license software that then plays with the manufacturer's product in a safe environment. Um, so that's fascinating that we've got to, first of all, that there will be a whole other group of people that we start to hire. There are already software experts in the notified bodies, but we're now hiring AI experts that are knowledgeable about natural language programs and fuzzy logic and other machine learning. All right. So the people we're hiring are really, really different and interesting. What else is going to happen to the notified bodies? Well, so besides that, we might algorithmically audit. Um, in some of the examples, I know you went to reps, but when you look at some of the demonstrations that were ongoing, there are software tools that extract things from lots and lots of papers. So again, our clinical experts, sometimes they're reading a manufacturer's clinical evaluation report, and the people that write those must read hundreds of papers. But there's now software that will extract all the features. Well, this paper had 108, patients enrolled, and the safety variables were these, and the performance variables were these, and these data were collected for these endpoints, and so on. But if it would reduce the amount of reading that we needed to do and then put summaries or key features or let you'd have to learn to trust it, because again, I suppose a notified body could be found negligent if we said we'd read something and we didn't read it. The AI team would say to me, well, it depends on, how it was trained and the data sets and how robust the data was on what on how these algorithms were trained. But yeah, I think it's going to help us with routine tasks. I don't think we're going to get rid of the need to be curious and our own resilience. Like we're still going to have to be humans that, yeah, make judgment calls. Because even, look, Elena, we've got hundreds of pages of regulation, we got thousands of pages of MDCG guidance, and we still need to hire people that have judgment calls. But if you can give them a subset of data to help them with a judgment call, does that let them do more in less time? Because things is the rate of change ever increasing, and
Yeah.
there's going to be ever increasing amounts of stuff to read and learn and do.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was sort of like where I was then also thinking as well, how will the role, because I totally agree with you. It's not that, I don't think that AI in any, well, not in any industry, because maybe in some, but if we talk about this, I don't think it will completely replace the need to have people, but it perhaps will impact perhaps the type of skills you might look for then in people, that might be working in a notified body. So what do you think would be the skills of the future?
Oh boy. I still, uh, notified body people. We need people who are decisive because, again, as I said, you can read and read and read, but there is still, you got to make a decision. And people, if you think European legislation is or UK legislation is going to be black and white, it is not. So decisiveness is still a good skill, and behavior to have. Observant, still, regardless of the technologies that come. Open-mindedness, um, listening, willing to consider alternative ideas. I think as a notified body auditor, there's times that you can go into an audit or a difficult meeting with a manufacturer and think, okay, they don't have enough. And then they tell you why they did it the way they did it. So you've got to be open-minded as a notified body employee. Versatile. The situations are always different. Self-reliant. I could, sorry, I'm going on and on, but good stuff. Ethical, fair, truthful. Yeah. Is that enough?
Isn't it so interesting that every single one you've said is a soft skill and not a technical skill? And it's
Oh, yeah, sorry.
I find it
Yeah.
really no, but I really find it really interesting because often, it's sort of like I find that in the industry that we recruit in particular, the functions that we recruit in regulatory, quality, and clinical, often a lot of emphasis is put on the technical skills and the qualifications. But the more that I talk to hiring managers, the more that I talk to people that are moving up into bigger, more senior roles, the more these softer things start to play a really, really important role. It's actually why we created the mentoring program that we have in collaboration with RAPS. It was really to address helping people to develop in that space, those types of skills specifically, as opposed to the technical skills where there's a lot of training and development programs already out there, and BSI already does a lot of stuff in that space that's really good.
And I really like the RAPS regulatory framework for promotion within a regulatory environment. We've actually taken it and adapted it a little bit to notified body like titles and skills because we don't register products globally, but we understand some requirements to register products globally. Have you seen that framework
I
of
was actually
how
part of
to?
creating it.
Oh, well done. It's brilliant. Sorry, I
Yeah.
have borrowed it and it's how
Oh,
we
that's really
promote
good.
people. Yeah,
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 that's
it's
really good.
brilliant.
I was we had an absolutely fantastic set of people that were part of that, and I had a small role to play, but I was just sort of giving, my perspective as a recruiter, and we had some amazing people give insights on what they see the different levels being. And actually there was a lot of discussion because it's different it's different depending on the size of the company, and titles look different. So it was all about coming up with sort of like a unified sort of framework that could be title linked, but actually we're talking more about like skills and competencies,
Yeah.
depending on experience. So for those of you who aren't listening, that's the RAPS regulatory competency framework. If you Google it, you'll find it, and we'll link it in the show notes. But it is a fantastic tool to be able to look at in terms of your own career progression, but also in your company to sort of say, how are we benchmarking, and what could the next role look like, and how are we grading people? So there's a lot of really good stuff that you can do with that. So I'm glad that you're using it, Suzie, I can't believe we're almost at the end of the time. So I have a few more questions that I want to throw at you though before we get to the end. So what advice would you give to 21-year-old Suzie Halliday?
I would make myself take even more opportunities. I mean, I can think of Jeff had the opportunity to live and work in South Africa, and I was doing my doctorate, and I was worried about my Viva. And so I didn't go. Like I would tell myself, stop worrying about that. Go on that trip, take that opportunity because I don't think I regret anything I did. It's things that I didn't say yes to. And it was scary and I was afraid of not doing well enough in my doctorate. I don't know. I would tell myself to say yes to
Yeah.
other opportunities.
Yeah, we always regret the things that we didn't do, right? I think it's a common saying that you hear. And I read something really interesting today. It was a letter. It was like an article about a letter that a school teacher wrote to parents when kids were coming up to do their sort of like major GCSE exams, and it basically was saying, amongst you there is, a chemist whose art skills don't matter, right? Like there is a brilliant artist whose math skills don't matter, and it's really about embracing each individual person, their skills, what they're good at, and also taking the opportunity and not worrying too much, because it will ultimately help you, whatever skills and experience you get now, whatever decision you take, it will ultimately help you in whatever way that you're going to go forwards. So I thought that was really interesting, really nice to read actually. What is the legacy, Suzie, that you want to leave on the world? The big one.
I know you ask everyone this. So I'm going to step back a bit. Continuous professional development is again important. It keeps you interested and maybe in a role or in a company. But for a few years, there was just so much that my CPD was, okay, figure the MDR out. Okay, figure out how to get designated in another member state. Okay. So I didn't do there wasn't a lot of formal CPD stuff. So last year, I did some formal CPD. It was called Empowering Leader. And So as part of this, I had to learn about myself, learn about my team, learn about how to lead an organization, or at least a bit of an organization. And okay, so I got all these strengths and weaknesses, and I had coaching, and it was brilliant. Okay, I would highly recommend that you take a little time for yourself and do that kind of thing. But in my weakness box is legacy. All right. I'm telling you this story. In my strength box are empathy and resilience and, okay, fine. But in my weakness box is legacy. And it seemed to say, you're not worried about leaving a legacy. And so I thought about it, and I'm trying to do the right thing one day at a time. There is always another medical device that is probably going to be really helpful to someone. And if it's got enough evidence to meet the requirements of the legislation, then we should help it get out as fast as possible. And when I say help, I don't mean consult, but notified bodies can communicate clearly, can set the expectations, can meet timelines, and then can really help manufacturers get good products to market as quickly as possible. So I guess in all the changes and all the things that go on, I'm just trying to go one day at a time, one difficult situation at a time. Um, yeah. And if that's enough of a legacy, yeah, I guess that's enough for me.
And listen, that's so eloquently put, and the impact that that has on patients and the world in general, right? In being able to go one step at a time, help one product at a time, one manufacturer at a time. Ultimately, that multiplies and it has a huge impact as a direct and indirect result. So, Suzie, it's been so nice having you on. I know that for those of you listening, I've been trying to get Suzie on for about a year. And eventually she agreed to it. Any regrets, Suzie?
No,
No
you've been very patient,
regrets.
and it hasn't been at all painful. So thank you very much for making it so pleasant.
Thank you so much, Suzie, for sharing your story and all your really interesting insights and thoughts about the future and AI. That was a really interesting part of our discussion. So to all of you listening, give this episode a thumbs up, watch us on YouTube, follow us on LinkedIn, follow Suzie on LinkedIn if you're not already doing that, and you will catch us next month for another episode of Career Diaries by Elemed. That's all for now. Bye, everyone.